Hi, this is Aaron and Linda with Traveling Flamingo, and today we've got two cruise news stories for you. We're going to be talking about whether or not your vaccine is going to be a requirement to sail in the future. And we're also going to be talking about what's happened again on this Singapore cruise, although it's not quite what you think. We're going to have all of that for you coming right up. So Norwegian Cruise Line CEO Frank Del Rio was having an interview with a magazine, Travel Weekly. We have a link below. And he had said that it will certainly be a requirement for the crew to get a vaccine when talking about whether or not passengers are going to require vaccines. He goes on to say that lawyers are looking into this as we speak, as to whether or not they're going to require vaccines for different cruises. And he also continues to say, but there is talk beginning to emerge from different corners of the travel industry, the airlines as well. Of course, requiring some kind of immunity passport demonstrating that you've had the virus or been vaccinated so that you are good to go. So that's what the current CEO of NCL is saying. And it brings up a really important question. And that question is, should people have to have the vaccine before they cruise?
I don't know if I was hiding my facial expression very well, especially working in schools, like talking even to a lot of other teachers and families. People have their own opinions about if they're even going to get the vaccine. And I think then when we start talking about restrictions, I mean, look how people are reacting to wearing a mask. Like, that's wearing a mask. And I think that you're going to have a lot of people who are not going to want to have to get vaccinated for a variety of reasons.
It's going to be interesting because I think one thing that I think you can say is a lot of people are just kind of done with all this COVID stuff. And, I think the question is worth asking as to whether or not people think that a vaccine should be required for these different things. These are private organizations, so ostensibly they can, not obviously do what they want, but they can create some of these rules. I wouldn't be surprised if airlines do, because we know airlines are huge transmitters of these viruses. So, it sort of begs the question, what's going to happen? Like, if you remember back, it was 19 years ago when September 11th happened, all the security rules that were put into place, I could absolutely see there being some sort of medical rules that get put into place now that require immunization records or create a database of immunization records.
I think the other thing that's challenging with that is we're very privileged as Canadians. We don't have to worry about paying for the vaccine. And there are people who've been out of work now for 10 months and it's been extremely challenging and they're not having to worry about paying for a vaccine for everybody in their family. We will eventually have access to it. And that's not the same for everybody. So that does then, not only do people maybe choose not to want it, is it even accessible to everybody?
I think too, like the brand damage that can be done by COVID when the vaccine comes out to any of these cruise lines. Like if you think of these cruise lines haven't been sailing for about a year, like that's billions of dollars of lost money. It's easier for them to say, look, we don't want the 15 to 20% of people who maybe don't want a vaccine to just not cruise, to prevent the sort of marketing PR disaster that is COVID being on a cruise ship, right?
Yeah, hopefully lessen the outbreaks. It's all about lessening the outbreaks. And I do see that. I think that some of the restrictions or some of the regulations or protocols they've brought in place, I'm in favor for. We've seen it in the past where viruses get on a cruise ship and spread and, you hear about hundreds of people becoming ill. And if it is more cleaning or wearing a mask or more physical distancing, less people on the ship, like I'm not sure what it's going to be, but I don't think all of those are going to be bad. I think it will be okay to have around for a while. But I do think it's going to be challenged. I just can't imagine them saying you have to get a vaccine. And I hear what you're saying in that they're a private company and they have the right to say we want to keep our employees, the ports, people safe. I just think it's going to be a hard thing.
I think so too. At the end of the day, though, if you're on a cruise ship, COVID or no COVID, wash your hands before you eat. Make sure you're being cleanly and don't touch food in the buffet. Like, at the end of the day, those are the things, irregardless, right? Because even when you get the vaccine, you can still get COVID. It just will not be the symptoms from what they're releasing will be very moderate symptoms, and you're not going to have the issues that you obviously have with COVID now. So be more akin to a flu than anything else. But you can still get it,
Well, and that's something else, right? Then, man, I love me some buffets, but are they going to be gone for a while as well, right? Is it going to be, yes, people are vaccinated, but it doesn't mean you're 100% immune. And so things like buffets are still going to be shut down for a while.
I do also think that the CLIA or the different cruise lines really should put together an option when you buy your package to donate to buy inoculations for some of the ports that we go to. Because I think one of the realities of it is, to Linda's point about, in Canada, we're not going to have to pay for a vaccine. That's not going to be the same for every country. And I do think that we should, as a community of people who cruise, help support the ports and destinations that we go to and make sure that they do have the vaccine as well to prevent this virus from spreading, both for the passengers on the ships, but also for the people who either live or work in those areas, because it is pretty bad.
Yeah, I'd love to see that, actually, the community. I think right now it's just been such a struggle because it still isn't up and going, but it would be great to see giving back. There are so many people who've been affected because of this, and it's a real struggle. So being able to give back or help would be great.
Yeah, it'd be great if when you pay for your tips, it was do you wish to add, an extra 2% to help support inoculations within the different ports that you're going to, or the family of crew members in different places that may not be able to afford it.
Yeah, and if it's inoculations or just help in general, it'd be great to just help in general. So
hopefully cruise lines, you're probably not listening, but if you are, or the CLIA, if you're listening, and probably not, but it would be great to have some sort of charitable event that I think we could all work together to help drive to ensure that these places that may not be the first on the list to get these different vaccines, or maybe more difficult to get the vaccines, are able to get them. Another thing, I know there's people who are already cruising, very small number of people. However, we had said this a long time ago, and we're going to talk about the story that happened in Singapore. But testing is not 100%. If you test negative, it doesn't mean that you're negative, because there is time when the virus incubates in the system and it's not detectable. So, we talked about this before. We saw this on the Sea Dream where they tested people, 15 different times. I recently had to go for a medical surgery and I had to get tested. So I've been through the process of what it is, and it's not exactly the world's most fun thing to do. But I think they were tested 3 times, and so they still had COVID on board. And I think people need to remember that the testing, you're in the middle of a pandemic, testing is not 100%, and you can't sort of fall into a false sense of security that you've been tested and you're 100% fine.
Yeah, I don't think they can say, oh, well, I didn't get a vaccine, but you can test me and I'm negative and still. They're going to have to figure that out. And I guess, as Aaron said, looking at the Royal Caribbean and the Quantum of the Seas has been doing cruises to nowhere from Singapore. And I know I've said a couple times I'd be down for a cruise to nowhere right now. But so a passenger had got on board, and a few days in, they were showing symptoms. Before they got on the ship, they had a negative test. When they were showing symptoms, they went to the medical center and they had a positive test. And so after that happened, they used their contact tracing. Everybody who was in close contact, passengers and crew, were put into isolation and were tested. And it's good to see that the procedures worked. There was a port to return to. There was, a medical facilities for the passenger on board. They're going to be doing a deep cleaning of the crew of the ship. So I think that there's a lot of positive that came out in terms of that. However, after all of this, it turns out he didn't have COVID. It was negative once he got on land. They tested him again, and it was and he was tested negative. Even the test which came back positive, they retested that sample and it came back negative. But what sort of struck me here in the story was looking at that all passengers were then going to be reimbursed 1 day, because their cruise was cut short by 1 day. So you're getting 1 day back. And I know there's been a lot going around in terms of the cruise and people having cruising credits and this and that, and 1 day. And I just interested to know other people's thoughts. At first I was like, really, 1 day? Like the hassle that you're now going to be having to go through, like, where are you staying? When's your flight? Are you able to get on your flight? All that for 1 day back. At first I really didn't think it was enough. And then at the same time, it's still a pandemic.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, if you're cruising during a pandemic, and this is what's sort of personally kind of annoying me when there's like a COVID positive case somewhere. Yeah. There is going to be COVID positive cases on cruise ships. I hate to break it to anybody, but if you're cruising in the middle of a pandemic, irregardless of the number of tests that you take, someone on that ship is probably going to have COVID. And if you do not accept that risk when you choose to book, then I don't know what you're doing, right? Like,
well, and I think that's changing the mind frame. I think is like the odds are, especially depending on the size, there's a chance that somebody on the ship is going to have COVID. So the goal is to limit the spread and limit how many people end up getting COVID.
I think to your point, like this worked out the way it was supposed to. You know, they identified the passenger, they quarantined the people who were close, they returned back, they cut it short by I think a day, and that's why they had the 1 day return. So to me, as much as everyone's like, oh no, COVID on a cruise ship, the process kind of worked. And, you know, if you're willing to go on a cruise ship right now, you have to accept that that's the process. In terms of the refund of a day because they cut it short, you know, in my personal opinion, you know, if we were cruising on a cruise ship during a pandemic and they cut it a day short, I'd be like, yeah, no, I could see that.
And thankfully we got at least a day back rather than being told you took the risk.
Yeah, right. And we've said this before as well. You're on a ship for 7 days or 5 days. Those symptoms are gonna materialize much quicker than on an airplane. So, you know, you got maybe 1,000 people on a ship, 800 people, 500 people, whatever. That's still a fair number of people with the odds of that incubating over the course of 3 to 5 days, up to 7 days. That, you know, I could understand why we're going to see some of this. And it surprises me that people are surprised and the news goes crazy when this happens because, yeah, like as long as the whole ship doesn't have it, like the process worked. Like we can't go back to the Diamond Princess or whatever where like, you know.
There wasn't a process.
Yeah, right? Like there's a process now. And if people have it, there's a way to deal with it until there's a vaccine. And then we can argue whether or not you should require a vaccine to be on the ship.
The cruise industry really is getting hit hard. And it's a $1 billion industry with many people's lives and financial and life tied to it. And they're just getting hit hard. And there are other travel, tourism things that aren't getting hit as hard. And I get flying is mandatory for some people. It's essential. And cruising is not essential like travel. It is, but it's essential for some people's livelihoods. And I think we have to start like, or eventually, maybe hopefully in a few months as vaccines are out and we're not having these same discussions anyway, it will be the discussion around the vaccine. But, you know, I think that, as you said, we have to be aware of the risks and how do we limit the risk?
Yeah. Well, look at Disney, right? We do a lot with Disney. I'm sure a lot of you know that. The anniversary is coming up for Magic Kingdom and it's selling out like no tomorrow. Like, you know, some of the monorail loop hotels you cannot get to because they're selling out that quickly. And like, there's an appetite for this, but the cruise line is not selling out quite as quickly. Like there are obviously people who have credits who need to spend them, who are trying to book them, and that's driving some of this. But like,
I don't know. There are a lot of people who signed up for those test cruises, so
True,
I think there is an appetite. It's just right now it's unpredictable. If your cruise is going to get canceled, is it going to happen? I think that as other people have commented, they're tired. They've already had 3 trips canceled. There's so much just general grief right now of COVID and life that's not the way it is. People are tired of booking trips, getting excited, and having it canceled.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us what you think. What do you think about vaccines being required? Would you be down for that? Is that something that you think isn't right? What are your thoughts when it comes to COVID being on a cruise ship if you're taking that risk and going now? Let us know in the comments. Again, we're a small channel. If you like this discussion, we really want to hear from you in the comments. Please like this video and subscribe. And again, happy travels.